My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piran Sivasankar, Guru Piranyo, fellow Jnanis. Today, I'm going to continue with our discussion on origin of humans and the evolution of human beings. And you will see that I covered, the evolution of we Homo sapiens over time, and I covered how we, were able to evolve through the various changes that is happening in the environment and also the circumstances we were in. As migration took place, we started seeing that, there was a major development in our brains. We develop languages, we develop a whole range of learnings, and then over time we develop institutions, we develop rules and regulation, markets, a whole range that we covered over the last few. And there is a change that is happening within us. Some of it is because of nature, and some of it is because of our own self, which, we were starting to learn from the environment, adapt, become more agile. And so there was an intellectual elevation that took place because our brain was starting to evolve. And we see that this is continuously happening. And we see that, this notion of we becoming a knowledge being that is continuously introspecting, contemplating, reflecting, and also starting to develop ourselves. And we became a very dominant species in this earth. So what I want to cover is, so we saw this evolution of human beings, from that ape right up to a modern human being. And there's something interesting as we were developing the technological revolution that was taking place, and it was powered by the human beings. And we started seeing that we started developing new technologies, to make life better. And we started seeing that, as we started developing new technology, we want to make things easier. We want to be more productive. We want to have more market reach, more richness. All those things forced us to look at new things, new learnings, new mathematics, new discipline areas. And we started developing, what we call the technology that helped us. So technology is based on science and deep understanding of nature and so on. And all of us are familiar with this information technology, that all of us are using it to beam across different places. And it is because of the leap in our mindset that is taking place. And that developed further. We started developing further new technology that we started using. I'm sure many of us are using watches that detect our heartbeat and detect our how many steps that we take. So we started developing new tools and technology to make life convenient and make our quality of life better. And two important things that was standing out for we Homo sapiens from the day of the first human, we wanted better quality of life. We wanted better food, better support for our families. And that started hundreds of thousands of years. And that is still inbuilt in us, in our DNA, that wanting to do better, wanting to be competitive, wanting for the species to progress, over time. So this whole notion of developing greater productivity, access to resources, live longer, better quality of life, better health. And also over time, this technology was put into use to reduce the aging process. There's a whole industry that is developed to slow down the aging process, slow down all the challenges and so on. So because of challenges, we start seeing that we started developing these new technologies and so on. And as we started developing, we see that, we are starting to now tinker with the various biological beings. So we started seeing technology coming together. We started combining what nature had and the learnings that we had. We started developing new fields of biotechnology. binom, bionic technology. So when people lose their hands, we can replace that with, mechanical hands and, or, eyesight and hearing. So we are starting to now combine technology with our own biology. And we started seeing new emerging areas. People who could not walk now can walk. So we started replacing parts of our body, right? So this is because we, as a species, built in our DNA the need to survive, the need to improve our quality of life, the need to sustain ourselves at a longer period. So that's inbuilt in our DNA. That is why the human mind is continuously evolving to preserve that species. And as I mentioned, in the early days, the mortality rate, people died at a very young age. But today, the lifespan is increasing because of technology, that discoveries that we have made. People who could not see can see. People who could not hear can hear. So we started, improving the quality of life. And now we are starting to see new emerging areas like genetic engineering. So we're now going down to the gene level to make the changes to get rid of or to overcome genetic diseases. And I'll come back to why this is very important, we as a species. So there are many things that we inherit from our ancestors, cancer genes, heart attack genes, diabetes, other disorders. And we see that knowledge now enabled us to understand the human physiology, understand nature better, and our human mind is able to start developing new knowledge that helps us understand our own genetic makeup. And also artificial intelligence, what motivates decision making and so on, how systems work. So we started seeing that the human mind, to survive and to preserve itself, there's a leap not in the body, but leap in the mind. And because of the leap in the mind, we are starting to see that we are able to replace parts of our body. And, we're starting to see artificial hearts, kidneys, and very soon we are starting to see that embedding of parts of our brain with artificial systems, that certain parts of the brains that are not working would be able to work more efficiently. And I think there's a prediction that very soon that we as a species, like how Homo erectus and hominoids became Homo sapiens as the brain developed, as we develop further technology and knowledge, within the next 100 to 150 years, we will become what we call Homo androids, where much of our body parts, we can replace it with other parts. I think heart attack probably would not be a major problem because I think you have replacement of hearts and kidneys and a whole range. Perhaps maybe in the next 50 to 100 years, maybe not in my lifetime or your lifetime, but maybe our grandchildren. So we're starting to see the human species evolve to the next level of what we call Homo androids, where much of our parts come from other synthetic. So this whole notion of artificial intelligence, even to make decisions, sometimes human mind can make certain decisions, but very complex decisions become more and more difficult. So we're starting to see, this notion of AI systems coming in to help make very complex decisions. Where does all this come from? It comes from the human mind, right? So we see that, our genetic code, biological code, gave rise to the human body, why the heart is in such a way, why, we have 2 hands and 10 fingers and so on. All this is because of that genetic code that gives, this genetic code is where the intelligence, where the knowledge, where the blueprint of our life, and this is true for all biological beings. So it's the DNA of nature or DNA of, you can call it God particle or whatever, but the DNA that we inherit determines who we are. And it is continuously evolving, right? And we see that over time, as the environment changes, nature and nurture, the DNA is continuously changing for better and also for worse. We are starting to see much of our body and our DNA incorporating a lot of plastics, because we have a lot of plastics and chemicals, and that's resulting in, various genetic diseases and so on. So there are good things. There are also challenges that are. So the genetic code is nature's blueprint of our life. So in the genetic code also is that not just the body, but our mind and our intellect and our own consciousness is inbuilt. So, and that is continuously evolving how we sense the world around us, right? So what is interesting is that we are starting to see genetic engineering, artificial intelligence are starting to change our genetic code. Today, we can use this various technology to understand all the chemical reactions that are happening in our body. And, we are able to, map out exactly what our genetic code, and also go in and cut the genetic codes and, do all kinds of changes to get designer babies and designer people. And this technology is already there. So we are starting to see that we organisms, are starting to become like algorithms, because we know exactly what chemicals, how it's operating, how it's functioning, the dynamics, and what is causing those changes. So it's somewhat like an algorithm, that nature's algorithm. So the human mind is able to decipher the knowledge that nature has, and in that process understand the various dynamism and algorithms that nature has put in place. So we are starting to master this. So we see that parents or couples that cannot have children today can have children through the genetic. We see that we can do genetic diseases that we can actually resolve it at the fetus level. So we are changing the way who we are. So we are starting to see that the organism is now seen as an algorithm, because there's a systematic pattern in our human genetic code. And because it's now treated like algorithms, we can now codify it into languages, mathematical and scientific languages, that we can start tinkering and changing those algorithms. And in the process, we are changing the human structure and the human personality. And over the next few years of that discovery, we're going to be seeing the transformation of human beings, designer babies, selection of how self-selection is going to take place. And so this is the evolution of human beings. And the one reason is that, built in our genetic code is that the need to live longer, better quality of life, better happiness, better joy. The search for this is what's driving this acquisition of this knowledge. You see, so people don't want to age. They don't want to have diseases. Many people, very interesting, they don't want to die, right? Everybody does everything to prevent that. Interestingly, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. Interesting, is it? So we're starting to see this search for this, joy or the happiness in this material world. And we are putting a lot of knowledge, scientific investments and R&D to preserve ourselves as a species. Very similar to how we were hundreds of thousands of years. Only now we have better knowledge and better technology. So the question then is that with all this happening, are we happier, right? With all this modernity, are people happier? The answer is not quite, right? So the answer is we are not happier. You can see all the developments and so on. People are not very happy. We're seeing that a lot more depressions, a lot more suicide, a lot more marital, problems, a lot more teenage delinquencies. So we're starting to see other problems that are manifesting in society. With all the technological revolution, you see that parents and children don't communicate. If they want anything, they do it through SMS, right? If you go to the restaurant, you see with parents and children, most of the time you'll see them, everybody's on the phone. Nobody's talking. So while we have so much modernity, we also have a lot of isolation that takes place, which impacts personality. So with all this modernity, are we happier? The answer is no. So how do we, how do Mahans and other great saints teach us the spiritual values, this wisdom, knowledge? All this technological revolution, scientific revolution gives us some degree of happiness and some degree of comfort, but it may not give us that, inner joy that we are searching for, what we call the subjective well-being. All this technology is about object and object-based, joy and happiness. It is not a subjective well-being. So how do we use this technology? How do we use this knowledge to attain the subjective well-being? The subjective well-being means using all this knowledge to understand the subject, who we are, what we are. So genetic engineering is using scientific knowledge to attain that joy, the inner joy, what Swamiji says, Summa Irakum Sugam. We need to start looking at from the genetic engineering to natural genetic engineering. Within all of us, there is nature, and nature is what determines our genetic code. And within nature, there is so much refinements that take place. And we see over the evolution of time, a nature-based genetic engineering. And this is what we see, that how do we, these great saints and sages and the Mahans, we're talking about the natural genetic engineering, the transformation of a gross mind to a refined mind. The habits that we have from the animalistic, instinct-based qualities to a more refined value system. These are what we call genetic engineering, and nature-based genetic engineering. As we understand our mind, as we get greater calm, coolness, clarity in our thought, we see that our brain, DNA starts changing. As our brain DNA starts changing, we see that there's a chemical change that happens in our body. When the chemical change happens in our body, we start seeing that our body structure, our way of thinking, our way of life starts transforming. And this is what all this while the great saints and sages for thousands of years were doing, this natural genetic engineering and transformation. So this is what Mahan's I God book is. This is what the Bhagavad Gita, which is a profound book. It's actually about an administrative gospel to make the transformation of the mind to become more stronger, more resilient, and so on. So it's a form of genetic engineering. And if parents have that kind of mindset and that nature-based genetic engineering, you see that the children also start imprinting that. The other aspect is that while artificial intelligence helps us with many things, the artificial intelligence is the foundation for that, and it is anchored on a natural intelligence or nature-based intelligence that is inherent in us. This is the jnana, or the wisdom knowledge that we have. So while artificial intelligence helps systems and robotic systems and other things, it all ultimately, depend very much on the human consciousness or the human intelligence. So never ever, leave everything to AI, artificial. It is artificial, right? We are blessed with the nature-based intelligence, which we need to harness. This is the wisdom knowledge that Mahans and other great saints are talking about. This whole notion of organisms as algorithms is a very interesting perspective. But, from a spiritual perspective, an organism is a spiritual being that is transcendental to this material, body, and it animates the material body. So it's still in the form of the full control is with you, and that spirit is transcendental, universal, and if the mind is anchored on that spiritual being, it is able to develop the mind. It is able to experience many things. It is able to create any experience that it wants. So we see that the language that Mahan's use very similar to what scientists are using, but it's all nature-based and nature-centric. So, and when we understand that, we see that all the technological revolution, scientific revolution could be seen in a much more universal perspective. So to acquire that natural genetic engineering that we undertake regularly, and to anchor our mind on not on artificial intelligence but natural intelligence, and for us as an organism to become a spiritual being and awareness of the spirit within us, we like scientists depend on the telescopes and microscopes, and scientific knowledge and technology. The Mahans rely on meditation. So their approach is not the journey outside, but the journey within. Instead of using telescope and microscope, they use inner scope to transform. As how scientists, do all the experiments in laboratories, test out different hypotheses. The Mahans and other great saints use their body, use their mind, and use their intellect as the laboratory for experimentation to discover themselves. And if all of us can get into our laboratory, which is the mind, every morning, every day, in introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation, we're able to harness that natural genetic engineer within us. We engineer, we are the CEO, Chief Enlightenment Officer, that is relying on the natural intelligence that nature's blessed us, and to discover that while we are biological organisms, we are imprinted, we are anchored, we are, animated by the spirit that is embedded in our DNA. That can only be achieved through introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation. This is what this journey is about. When we do that, we understand science, we understand technology, we understand nature, we understand God, and we understand our own self. And this is the teachings of this great Mahan and many, many other Mahans. Sadosham.